Dear Commander, Ascanio Gandolfi is one of several people that helped the local resistance break out of Compound 31, not to be confused with City 31, an Advent prison in France. During the breakout, Gandolfi demonstrated his own combat prowess, and between seeing that and talking with him later, I test that he easily meets XCOM's qualifications for a soldier. He'll fit right in with a lot of your recruits too. He dreams of freedom, is willing to help both humanity and the planet when he can, and has had to learn the harsh reality of living in a gang-infested city where there is a little difference between resistance and organized crime. If you haven't already noticed from how he likes to decorate his rifle, he has quite the sarcastic sense of humor too. Like me, he doesn't like being told what to do, but will grin and bear it if he must. In that way, he's a better soldier than his sister, who really doesn't like taking orders. Ascanio, along with his older sister Stefania, led a gang in the criminal underbelly of New Rome. You may have noticed Mr. Gandolfi's abundance of cyberware. His gang, like many others, cannot afford gene therapy, so they take the other route. Also, he says their mothers disappeared while visiting a gene therapy clinic, so that's another reason why the siblings avoid them. You may ask Shin about the horrors she saw among slum dwellers in her adventures prior to your rescue from Advent's gene therapy clinic if you want more examples. Their unwilling supplier is Augustus Interactive, one of many megacorporations chartered under Advent, whose logo you can see on towers that dominate most city centre skylines. You know Augustus as a major supplier of chips for Advent's mechs, among many other things. The cyberware that Gandolfi uses was created for Project Simulacrum that Augustus is developing for Advent. I don't yet know what this was for, but Nautilus has hired the Gandolfi gang to investigate. In my own investigation that led me to the Gandolfis, there was a mention of Simulacrum being used in the event of further delays for something called Avatar. Hopefully, either the Gandolfis or I will turn up more on that too, whatever it is. Yours, Lieutenant Commander Olivia Maynard, Sepia. P.S. Yes, Operation Demonetized Noodle was a real operation name. If you want me to tell you what that was about, I'd be happy to do so over a spot of tea. I just hope I'm still alive when you get this message.
I can say what's different about me compared to most I've noticed is that my first experiences with the aliens in person, they were good. My birth parents and I got separated at some point, and I had to scavenge for food and shelter. To make a long story short, I was bad at hiding, and I got picked up eventually. But it was one of the places the people who aren't people were working from, if that makes any sense. No clue why, but they look after me. Maybe it was pity. Maybe it was just to improve their ruse. Wasn't exactly in a position to bite the hand that fed me. They were warm in their own way. Like they didn't quite know how to do it, but were good enough at passing for it. At some point, the war stopped, and I think they were talking about sending me to some kind of place where the other kids who lost track of their parents went. But it had been years at this point, you know, and I'd known them as my family longer than the one I'd been born into. As strange as it sounds, I didn't want to leave them. I think they agreed because the sounds of one of them, Papa, ripping up the paperwork with his gangly hands with a great big smile on his face, it sticks out in my memory. I think it might have been the first real smile he had. Anyways, years pass, and I start learning more about myself and the world around me. Because of how complicated my household was, I could get into the restricted neighborhood where the aliens in Paris lived pretty freely. I had to go to a human-only school, though. None of the kids liked me because they saw who dropped me off, and they acted like I was diseased. I had the bad habit of fighting back, though. Hard. I'm not good at hiding, remember? That suited me just fine, though, not having many friends. I cooled off after a while, anyways. I had my books, and I had music class, and at home a stash of records my new parents saved from before the war. Old synth music from decades before I was born. Taught me how to feel strong emotions in new ways nobody else seemed to get. And I knew right away I had to share them. Didn't take long to start pulling it together, and by the time I was at the school, I knew I wanted to be a rock star. But one that would bring people together, help folks see that we humans and the aliens aren't all that different, like what I came to know. But after a while, I stopped getting the grant money. I guess my stuff kept getting too out there for the government. Too many allusions to how I thought we were all being victimized, aliens included. I'm still not good at hiding. For a while it went great being independent. By 2027 I had a solid group, me and Hallie and Mads. Toward the few years, we were able to skirt past the censors with my alien connections for a while. Among some other things. Certain people, though, they had other plans. Went back on our deal. Did some bad things to me. And blew up Hallie's apartment. Probably disappeared my family for all I know. Had to hide. But you know, I'm bad at hiding.
Kyle, Advent-approved name 14, was born into the old world but grew up in the Advent world. He felt little of the pain and confusion of the transition to the new government. Thus, as he grew up, he instinctively took to innovations and advancements offered to the human race. The idea of unlimited access to information via Advent's new telecommunications network, AdWeb, seemed so marvelous. When told that it was basically a replacement for the internet, he balked at said old people remember everything better than it really was. AdWeb was faster and bigger and better, and it wasn't polluted by what his parents called trolls. So naturally, he got a job at IT. That's how he found himself sitting behind a screen, monitoring data traffic to ensure no outages or slowdowns were interrupting AdWeb. The job was so different from what he had dreamed of. He was stupefyingly boring. He started messing around to pass the time. He found a way to access some of the data and view it on his monitors. Most was personal information. Reams and reams of it. Also terribly boring. He sought out more. Eventually he found that some of the data contained video files. Advent was watching select members of the public. He didn't care who these people were or why they were being watched. All he was interested in that they were were the movements of the videos feeds caught them naked or, gasp, having sex. It was while watching one such feed that he got a message on his computer. He jumped so high at the thought of being caught that he knocked his desk over. After righting the workstation, he built up his courage, fueled his curiosity, and responded to the innocuous hello. This led to a long-time correspondence. Kyle was the messenger who said her name was Daphne, not on the list of Advent-approved names, got to be friends of a sort. They shared jokes and stories and dreams. Eventually, he confessed that he had cracked into the data feeds and shared the information with Daphne. In the middle of a late-night chat, long after his shift was supposed to be over, Daphne told him to run immediately. He had to leave Advent or his life would be forfeit. He had been added to a hit list, and she'd know that he had less than an hour before Advent took him away, never to be seen again. He trusted his friend, whom he had never seen in person, so he ran. Daphne set locations of safe hideaways and secure routes. When he asked how she knew where to go, she said that she would tell him later. Now, she was barely able to keep ahead of the Advent squads. She led him out of the city and into a haven of people who had rejected Advent rule. Using the rickety equipment those people had scavenged from anywhere and everywhere, he tried to get back in touch with Daphne, to thank her, to meet her, and to ask why he was now a fugitive. Date of birth, 30 November 2002. Place of origin, Greensboro, Georgia, United States. Wayland's childhood was fairly conventional for a small southern town. His brother Redmond, alias Thumper, would blow things up and get in trouble with lots of people for a variety of reasons. But Wayland kept to himself and worked on vehicles and machinery, learning how they work, how they sounded, how to repair them, and the subtle details that were what intrigued him. Some years after the invasion, the Oakley family moved to a newly built community outside the Atlanta city center. It was not a particularly good place to live, but there they lived for a long while, making a living how they could. Thumper built explosives for rebels. His parents did normal work, and Wayland modded and fixed cars for anyone who needed mods or fixing. Eventually, they more or less adopted Hoagie, a Batch N hybrid, whom they found wandering the streets in a daze. He was taken by the brothers as one of their own. Thumper and Hoagie repaired more often, with Wayland being more introverted of the bunch. A few more years go by, and Thumper decides to go off and join some resistance movement, with Hoagie following behind. Wayland stayed behind to look after his parents for a while, but he ended up being contacted as well. His technical knowledge with machinery and alien tech would be a boon to the resistance, is what he was told. Then they said he could get access to a fabrication machine that could create almost any conventional part. So off he went to join up. He gave his parents a hug goodbye and told them he'd write as often as he could. Central Officer Bradford's notes. Wayland here has told me that he is game for whatever role we need him to fill, Commander. I can respect a man that adapts to changes in that situation. More of a thinker than his brother, I'll tell you that much. Quiet, but he knows what he's doing.
Known throughout the West Coast autonomous regions as Rusty Cage Kimura, or just Rusty by her compatriots, Ami Kimura spent her early life in Advent-occupied Kyoto before losing her parents to a resistance attack. At age 11, she was relocated to live with her uncle Junichiro, a former San Francisco police officer who resided in New Modoc, an independent nation-state occupying what was once Northern California. He was a member of the Lawmen, an order of formal cops dedicated to maintaining order within the autonomous regions. Unlike most nationalist militias who popped up in the wake of the invasion and subsequent fall of the United States, the Lawmen worked in tight collaboration with Advent as part of the treaty deal. For the Lawmen, this meant quelling dissident groups and tracking down unauthorized alien tech in exchange for aid and a sovereign piece of land to call their own. Having grown up on a media diet of their uncle's VHS collection, Rusty idolized the heroic archetypes of the classic westerns and was determined to prove herself worthy as a lawman, despite her uncle's doubts. After years of rigorous training, she excelled as one of the first women of color to serve as a ranger in New Modoc, making over 145 arrests and busting 20 Illyrium smuggling operations. In spite of her misgivings towards the occupying aliens, she still felt that her patriotic duty to preserve the values and national identity of the Old World United States superseded that. However, as hard as it was being an immigrant before, she was about to get a hard lesson in what those values actually meant. After a strange parasitic worm infestation started plaguing many of New Modoc citizens, the lawmen partnered up with noted Christian nationalist militia, the Liberty Alliance, to help quell the resulting unrest. Rusty began to feel even more like an outsider, as the culture of the Alliance brought with them made her fellow lawmen more willing to show their true colors around her. It was only after interrogating a captured anarchist by the name of Elixir that she learned Advent and the Alliance were both responsible for the outbreak of the worms, as part of a clandestine operation known only as Project Freedom. And the lawmen, not wanting to violate their end of the treaty, were complicit in all of it. Rusty escaped with Elixir and has since become something of a wandering nomad. She's tried to settle down with various communes and resistance havens, but her ego and stubborn sense of authority have made mutual collaboration in the absence of law and order difficult for her. Though her combat prowess and quick trigger finger could be used to XCOM in the field, it's her hubris and lack of cooperative skills that need work if she is to fight alongside us.
Valeri had a normal childhood as someone growing up in as normal a childhood as someone growing up in an Advent-controlled world really could. Her family hopped back quite a bit before the invasion, so having to move back to France when the aliens landed didn't really affect her or her family. Of course, Advent eventually set up checkpoint upon checkpoint to prevent this, with the reasoning that people constantly crossing borders could be liaising with the resistance. So by the age of 4, she settled down in Marseille. She started going to school. She got good grades, albeit nothing special. Outside of school, she volunteered wherever she was needed and frequently helped out her classmates and friends, earning a reputation for being one of the nicest people the people who knew her ever met. Passing high school with flying colors, Valeri moved on to university in September 2031, studying biochemistry. Her ambition was to partake in the miracle work that took place in the gene therapy clinics, at least in her eyes, and help millions of lives. Exactly 1 year and 1 month into her course, that changed. On the 9th of October 2032, prominent French politician Marcel Louvois was murdered. In an unfathomable streak of consequences, Valeri was named the primary suspect, tried and falsely found guilty. Her sentence, 13 years in Compound 31, the most notorious Advent correctional facility in the entire region. Safe to say that Valeri did not like it there. As luck would have it, though, on the 7th of July 2034, the day after her 21st birthday, a local resistance cell executed a prison break of Compound 31 to free one of their own members, leaving the gates to freedom wide open. Torn between following a resistance her society demonized and staying in what was left of Compound 31 to rot, Valeri chose the former. But the damage had already been done. Compound 31 had irreversibly changed her. Gone was the kind, sweet demeanor of Valeri de Castro, the girl who helped everyone with their homework and volunteered at the charity shop after school. All that was left was a woman cold and quick to anger, taking violence as the first option at almost all times, and one terrifyingly good with a rifle. The vast streak of coincidences that led to her creation gave her the moniker 13. Unlucky for some, definitely for Advent. The murderer they sought is out for them, forged by their own hands.